Okay, thank you.
All right, it's called the school committee meeting order for February 8th. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Great. I want to start by recognizing Westwood Media, which is live streaming the meeting and also recording the meeting for later viewing by on its platforms. Anyone else looking to videotape today's meeting? Great. I will turn it over to Tim for the superintendent's report.
Sure, thank you. So there are a couple of things that are formally on the agenda for the report tonight. One is we're going to start off with the digital literacy and computer science curriculum review. Then Lemma will do the quarterly financial update. One of the things that's not on the agenda, but I do, as part of the report, want to share is some positive news about Pine Hill. So I'm excited and looking forward to doing that. And then there's a little, just a little thing at the end of that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Allison and Steve to talk about the DLCS review.
So, thank you very much. This is just kind of the slideshow version of kind of the complete report that you have a draft form of in your packet. And that's in draft form because we want to have time to make sure we send it out to the full committee, get any kind of details back and final edits before we put it out more broadly to the wider community. But we're excited about the work that was done over the last year and looking forward to sharing a little bit about that. I'm going to turn it over. Apparently, it's supposed to be in charge of the clicker, so I'm going to try and do a good job here.
I think you've got this one.
Yeah, I missed. So this was an interesting project. We pulled together folks from all throughout the district, both to look at the digital literacy and computer science standards and the library standards together. Steve's going to talk a little bit about why we combined those two into a single program and curriculum review. But you can see it's a nice representation from throughout the district, different departments, different roles, different schools.
Yeah, great. So hi everyone. This quote is pulled from an article that we read, I think it was before the first meeting. And we chose it really because it overlaps a theme that's important to both departments, instructional technology and also library media. And that's one of the reasons why we decided that we wanted to have a combined curriculum review for those two departments. I also want to point out that this article was written before generative AI was unleashed to the world. And I think that what you see in this quote is even more relevant now that we're living in this age of generative AI. So I just think it captures the idea of pulling these two departments together. So these are our vision statements. We think that they are a reflection of the work that we want to establish for student outcomes and dispositions that we like for them. I'd like to draw attention to some of the parallels between these two statements. For example, you'll see that both of them highlight creativity and being active participants in the community. And they also dovetail very nicely with the mission and core values of the district.
I'll comment one other thing on that kind of joint project. One of the things pulling the groups together allowed us to do was not only see kind of commonalities, but real differences where those programs are distinct and needed kind of their own space and time and staffing. So we really did look at kind of ways that libraries are uniquely positioned to do some things and ways that the technology staff are really uniquely positioned to do some things too. So this is just a reminder of kind of where we are in the review cycle. We completed math last year, launched this digital literacy and computer science review, and we are currently in, where are we? World languages. So we've started that and anticipate wrapping that up sometime this spring and coming out with recommendations either later in the spring or first thing in the fall. And next up for us will be visual and performing arts. In terms of sort of the what of what happened, if you look at the list along the right side, I have to do that. We spent a lot of time sort of digging into the standards for both of these areas to look at what we should be doing with students to make sure they have the skills and understanding they need to kind of launch into the world and be thoughtful, responsible citizens. We also looked a lot at survey feedback. We got a ton of information from students, staff, and families did a fair quantity of outreach to other districts and research about other districts and other programs, and finally just sort of research in general about kind of what is happening in the universe of these sort of types of programs.
So these are kind of 4 of the overarching themes that emerge for DLCS, and I don't want to presume you know what DLCS stands for. It's Digital Literacy and Computer Science. I think sometimes that people assume people know what these acronyms are. So the first one is really just kind of like equitable access, high quality curriculum is really a focus on digital literacy. This is research skills, ability for students to be able to critically analyze information that they see on the web, and really just to be savvy in general. We are in an age, obviously, where we are inundated with information and misinformation, and so that's obviously important that we provide some teaching in that area. And I'm looking forward to the new structures that will ensure that all students will have those opportunities to get those skills. Ethical online engagement, this was actually a theme that really came out with the parent surveys. It's very important to me. I think about this all the time, especially the idea of healthy balance. And also really students using technology intentionally to be productive. And they're good at using technology for entertainment reasons, but they need to see that there are other ways to use technology to accomplish things and to make things and to be productive. For the third one, I'm really thinking a lot about coding and computer science at the elementary level. Several years ago, we introduced the coding special in grade 3. That has been fantastic. Since then, our ITCs have done a really good job of incorporating some coding, computer science at the other levels, like grades 2 and then 4 and 5. But we really want to provide more continuity and consistency across all the grades. So we're looking forward to that, especially as they transition to the middle school, that there's like a common set of skills that students have when they get there. And then lastly, foundational skill development. That's like basic things like students, when they go to grade 2, they need skills with navigating a Chromebook and a keypad and a touchpad, that kind of thing. And it's also giving them the skills to efficiently navigate the hardware and software platforms that we use so that they're productive and they're not inhibited by these technologies when it comes to using them for their learning. So those are kind of 4 major themes.
On the library side, the first one is very similar, kind of a equitable access to curriculum and programming. And one thing these 2 departments share is they provide direct instruction and curriculum, but also sort of programming above and beyond that. So working with teachers in a kind of collaborative fashion, working to sort of do other things within the environment, like robotics programs and things like that. So we want to look at ways to support students' academic, social, and emotional growth. Big theme was revitalization of the middle school library, reopening of the library itself, hiring of a middle school librarian. That's a real loss to the district. It's a loss that, it was a budget cut that we took at the moment of a retirement during the pandemic at a time when we really needed to do it. But there's a lot of good reasons I'll talk about later about why bringing that back in is really going to be important for students. Continued expansion of our library collections to include that we've got really kind of thoughtful, robust, diverse resources. And ultimately, we'd like to see the restoration of a library director role. That's probably a few years down the road, we understand that, but the leadership of that department and the ability of that department to kind of continue to grow and innovate with the times is going to be directly connected to whether we can provide them with someone whose job it is to sort of help with that. That is another position that was cut in pandemic, so that would also be a restoration.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a mix of district-wide recommendations for both departments. I'll just mention, you can look at the report and read up on all those different things there. I'll just mention the first one. We need to, the DLCS standards that the state puts out, they're in grade spans, we need to start with like scope and sequence. Let's drill down to specific grades and what do we want our students to learn in those grades. And by doing that exercise, and we've already kind of started it, that will allow us to develop more specific curriculum, such as like DLCS special at the elementary level. Number 3, I wanted to just mention as well, we've done a fair amount of work around AI, but I think that work needs to continue. And so we're looking to assemble an AI literacy task force. And I personally think there are 2 main objectives there. One would be to provide more professional development for staff. And second is to instill AI literacy skills in our students. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I know that our students are going to have to work alongside AI when they leave the Westwood schools, and we need to prepare them for that. So that's an important piece.
I also want to highlight number 5. One thing that came up a lot in the course of conversation was the role that libraries have played in the schools as sort of safe spaces, really supportive spaces for students who need kind of access to resources, but also a place that is quiet and calm and kind of a regrouping area. And because of that, they're uniquely positioned to do some things around mental health and programming support. So that's a piece of this as well. That's kind of, you may not expect to see that, but we really did end up talking about that quite a bit.
Great. 1 and 2 are very much related. I've already kind of touched on it, but it bears repeating. We are intent on providing a robust and consistent DLCS experience at the elementary level. The addition of an ITC at that level, as well as the restructuring of the specials, will allow us to do that. Item 4 is interesting. That was very much a recurring theme in the surveys, especially the students. They're like, I need to learn how to type. And over the years, that has also bubbled up when I speak with parents a lot. And so we do provide students with an orientation to typing. We've set them up with a platform. They do a little bit of that work in the classroom, and then they go home. They have access to this typing as they want. But we are looking to actually like formally pilot something and have 1 or 2 teachers offer up their time and to collect data and see like, is there actually a difference between like students that are getting explicit instruction on some kind of a schedule for typing skills versus those that don't. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think it's time that we give it its due course.
It's come up over and over again
Yeah.
every time we
Whatever
do.
happened, I mean,
yeah.
maybe I'm an old man, but like 30 years ago, everyone took typing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
So what, did it just kind of fade away in
Yeah,
the curriculum?
I think as my sense is as people got access younger and younger, they learn kind of,
Yeah.
a manageable method that's not touch typing, and then they
Okay.
kind of stick with that. We'd be looking at kind of grades 4 and 5 when the writing sort of workload starts to ramp up. As target grades to try and pilot something. And ultimately, we were just trying to answer the question, is it worth investing the time given the other tools and ways that you can use technology to produce the written word? I'm getting increasingly proficient with just talking at my computer. I wanted to highlight number 6 as well. We have this wonderful, lovely kind of collection of books in our preschool, and it was really never too early to start sort of advocating for literacy. The collection is, it's gone through several iterations of organization. If Lisa Friedman's here, she can nod. And they really would love to make it a more robust collection, but that also could circulate, which would take some doing, right? So we need some oversight to manage that, to kind of catalog it, really round it out, and make it a great resource for our youngest kids as they develop those skills.
Actually, the preschool PTO just put out a little request for book donations. They have some specific books that they're looking for, but I know they're doing a great job of coordinating that already.
And I feel like folks have been very generous over the years, and we want to take care of that and make it particularly useful both in school and as a take-home resource would be great.
Yeah.
I can start this one if you want.
Yeah,
Just-
yeah, by all
I
means.
think this was sort of the number one recommendation out of the library review had to do with the middle school. And I think this comes at us for a few reasons. One is the loss of the librarian at the middle school has meant a number of losses. One is access to some key kind of research databases and things that you're not actually allowed to subscribe to as a school if you don't have a librarian, a certified librarian in the building. And so our kids have had to sort of find other ways to access those things through public library access cards, which gets tricky. You know, we have students from Westwood, we have students from Boston. We want to make sure everybody's got sort of fair and equitable access. You know, a second real piece has to do with students and their independent reading. There's a lot of research that shows that this is right around the time that kids stop picking up books for fun and start doing other things, you know. And so a librarian can be really critical in kind of keeping that drumbeat of interest in books and in reading alive, which we really believe is important for kids in terms of their knowledge and access of the world. And finally, you know, that library, if you've seen the high school's program here is so robust and so vibrant in terms of the types of programming that they provide outside just the regular kind of space and access to resource. There are author visits. You saw the Anne Frank exhibit. The library becomes this sort of place where kind of wonderful school-wide things happen. But to do that, you need somebody who's kind of there consistently to coordinate those efforts. So that's really the main thing coming out of the middle school. And
Yeah.
anything for
I'll just talk a little bit about 3 and 5. So as you know from Tim's budget presentation last month, we're shifting the model from a dedicated instructional technology coach to one where we have technology facilitators, one at each grade level, and then one like in the arts that could cover the 3 different grades. This model is not that different from the high school model where we have ITCs that are also classroom teachers. It's been very effective. They have a really intimate knowledge of the curriculum, and I think that they can help facilitate integrating those, what we're saying, DLCS learning targets into specific lessons. So we're excited to try out this new model starting next year at the middle school. And do you want to talk about one? Or
Yeah, I think the high school, I mean, the
Yeah.
high school library is in really great shape, really. So a lot of the focus that we talked about, we have a very strong librarian who's really brought a lot of programming in. She's done a lot to diversify the collection. She's done a lot of work to make the space a really manageable, workable space that's useful for kids. So we really ended up talking about sort of these things like programming. You know, what types of programming could we do that would be kind of pushing ahead. And one of the concepts that came up was some partnership both with our guidance department and sort of outside folks around career development. That is something that libraries serve a function of out in the rest of the world, right? If you go to your town library, it's a place that really is a resource for thinking about your future and your life. And so thinking about the high school library in that way made a lot of sense.
Great. I'll just very briefly, the number one is just an offshoot of this idea of AI literacy task force. Clearly, ground zero is at the high school, and so we do think that there's needs to be a lot of work in that area. I think it went to sleep. We'll just, lift the lid. And that's not you.
Okay.
Yeah, so, so we really need to lean into the teaching and learning and how it pairs with AI and what needs to be done to address that. So it's still in the infancy stage, but that's a particular focus area for the task force going forward.
This is just a kind of things sort of put into timeline form. We just put one example slide up here, and you saw the more complete list in your report. But we wanted to sort of show you when we do the recommendations, we want to break them down into sort of measurable, meaningful tasks that we can complete within a timeline. So we're really looking to get started quickly on a lot of the work that needs to happen. Particularly that work around sequencing out curriculum. What is it that we really want to see in each grade level or each grade level band? And also some of the changes to the technology structure, as well as getting going on hiring a librarian. So Next up in review, like I said, visual and performing arts, and then we come back to science and engineering, which I think a couple people were around for that one, English language arts and literacy, and social emotional learning. And I think whereas the social emotional learning, I think, was paired together with another review one year, I think we're going to give it a full look and full attention because more and more we're seeing the need to have really explicit instruction around social emotional learning, not just pre-K to 5, but kind of all the way up the line. And there are good kind of curricular resources that are coming out all the time. And I think that's it.
That's
Did
it.
I
Thank you,
miss it?
thank you. No, I think that was great.
I have a question. Can you give examples of what the elementary DLCS curriculum would look like? Like what are we, like, I know we know coding in the 3rd grade, but what
Yeah.
are we thinking of introducing in 2nd and 4th and 5th?
Yeah, so the learning strands are computing and society, digital tools and collaboration, computing systems, and computational thinking. Those are like the broad ideas. So an example of computing and society would be they would be learning about security measures when you're on the web, and passwords and how to protect that information, stuff like that. Digital tools and collaboration would be creating digital artifacts, being creative, using different tools, and collaborating with others as you create those artifacts. It could be a slide presentation or it could be a video, whatever. Computing systems is literally like understanding systems, like what is a network? What are computers, like what are they made of? How do they work? Things like that. And then computational thinking is more the computer science coding stuff, and that's like the logic behind it. We're talking about if-then statements and loops and conditionals and stuff like that, which they are absolutely learning already, but they will learn it in a sequence and a progression where it'll get them to a place where they can be even more abstract when they get to the middle and high school levels. So that's kind of what it looks like.
And the instruction will be provided by,
Instructional
the
technology
ITCs.
coaches, yeah.
okay.
And I'll reiterate that they've done a lot of this already, not just in grade 3, but they've had opportunities to push into some of the other classes, but this will be consistent and across, the schools and have a good logical progression through the grades.
Yeah, if I can just echo that point, actually, that Steve just made, right, is the structural change related to this is to make sure that every child in every grade level, in every classroom across in every school across the district, and when I say every grade level 2 to 5, right, has a consistent experience. And that's something that we really believe is critical for their foundational success moving forward.
And so I was the school committee member who was on the DLCS curriculum review, so it was obviously my first time doing anything like this, and the thought behind it was actually really interesting. I think I told Allison a few times, seeing a bunch of, folks from across the district who work in academia really put thought behind how curriculum is going to be developed was interesting in and of itself. But then when we saw the survey results and how it actually reflected a lot of the discussion, it was really interesting. And, I don't expect that everybody has gone in and read every line of the survey results. I realize they're very robust, but I will say it was actually kind of the, in reviewing it, the theme around inconsistency and around the desire to have a specific call out for a DLCS piece in the curriculum came directly from the teacher surveys in elementary school. So it clearly was like a trend. And I will also say it is worth reading some of the elementary student school responses if you haven't already, because they're pretty awesome. Some of them are really funny, but they're also just really insightful.
Yeah.
And the typing theme, just to circle back on that, also came up in high school, where students said that they identified being able to type efficiently as a top skill that they believed was important to them. So in addition to internet safety and things like that, but typing came up there as well. So.
And is the typing pilot program going to be part of the DLCS specialty?
No.
That-
No.
No, we don't
So-
think so.
So I want to understand this more, because everything comes at a cost,
Yes.
right? And we're already, this proposal is already looking at cutting things out of the special. So if we're going to dedicate more time to typing, what is the cost there? I mean, I understand it's a skill, and I know
Right.
a lot of our kids are hunt and peck, and
Yeah, the concept, I mean, actually, it's interesting, there's a library folks who were sort of sitting around talking about this, and the concept was really, let's see if we can get a couple teachers who are willing to pilot it as we provide the sort of software and a little bit of training, and they just commit to 10 minutes a day
Yeah.
with their students, and we'll track kind of some data before and after results. What I'm really interested to see is if teachers see any noticeable impact on the volume of student-written expression, because I do think that's a thing. If kids sort of physically are having a hard time getting the stuff down, and often we're asking kids to write on demand in a classroom setting. We're not setting them off by themselves where they could use voice recognition more easily or some other kinds of tools. So given that that's the environment, is this something that we can see some impact? It's obviously not a super scientific controlled study, but we want to take a look and see, and just honestly see what the teachers feel about it. If a teacher tries it and feels like it's making a difference, that's an important thing, because for teachers themselves to want to do it will make a big difference in how well it's done in terms of the amount of time. But we don't think it's like it's a very short time period per day. It's just consistency that would be needed.
Yeah.
I have a question. So one of the things you highlighted was the need for kids to learn how to be like ethical computer users. I don't know exactly what the terminology was. So I interpret that as like related to internet safety and cyberbullying and all of those, utilizing social media, those sort of things. Where does that fall in that progression? It didn't stand out when you went through the 2nd through 5th. So I'm just wondering.
That would occur at all
Throughout
levels.
all, okay.
Yes, absolutely. That's this whole idea of responsible use and being kind to one another and online, and that's a drumbeat that has to happen at each level. And it's already happening. Again, we just need to develop that consistent message at all levels. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I actually ask a question about the timeline? There's like the timetable at the beginning of the slide deck.
Way back? Oh, this one?
Yeah. So I'm trying to understand, so is next year then the recommend and develop piece, or is that happening sooner than it usually would?
Yeah, we've just finished up the actual review itself, and then next year, recommend and develop is really, we kind of launch into fleshing out what the curriculum is going to look like, and maybe looking into specific resources that can support it. So it might be that we end up investing in something out there in the universe that supports some of our coding efforts in some grade level or another. That's the kind of thing that and also just kind of filling out unit plans and things like that. That's all in the summer and beyond.
So then how is it then just further implemented in 25, 26?
That cycle's a little bit less rigid than it
Okay.
appears right here. We have a tendency to get out ahead of where this actually
Yeah, I
says.
heard,
So
I know
just
you said it was.
we just say that to buy ourselves a little time in case we need
Got
it.
it. Perfect.
But yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think that's the math review, for example. We were already sort of piloting things kind of midstream at the middle school as we started, because we knew we needed to do it, and the review just sort of helped cement that yes, in fact, this is very important.
Another question. Are we, during your review of all of the factors that you looked at and all the research you did you come out of that thinking that there was a deficiency particularly in the higher grades when it comes to sort of, I'm thinking more of computer science, the computer science component? Only because if you have coding in 3rd grade and then you don't touch it again until 6th grade, there's a gap. And I know that the ITCs were trying to fill in that gap. But did you see that there actually was some sort of deficiencies as a result of that gap? Or is this just sort of, moving with the century, moving
Yeah.
into the century? And
I would say relative to other districts, we've actually done quite a bit. In its current form, we have We have CS types things happening at all the levels. Obviously, as a result of this, we'll have more continuity, and I'm like just super excited that we have that in place. At the upper levels, like at the high school, it's just a bigger challenge to provide. So you'll see, like, one of the slides talked about some expanded options for like juniors and seniors, but there's really nothing for freshmen and sophomores. And that's just like a puzzle where I don't know what the answer is. But I was actually talking to Jimmy Looney about that today, who teaches computer science. And it's like, is there a way to do something in that little grade span? And we don't know the answer yet, but that's like the one area now where there won't be like an offering, a specific offering for computer science. Not that they don't get some of those skills in like core content areas. There are places where it can crop up, but that's like one spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Lemon now to talk about the Q2 financial update.
Okay, thank you. Tim, I don't think it's easy probably to put the bar chart out. If not, I'll just talk to this
Yeah, I
because
think,
you don't have the
unless
graphics.
you want me to.
Okay, so
graphically put it.
I won't bury the lead on this. You guys received a memo with a Q2 update. The key finding as I ran the numbers is that we are in a balanced position for the operating budget at this point in the year. Our expenditures are at 43.2%. At last year at this time it was 44.7%. So we're spending at a slower clip, but there's an explanation for that. And usually I divide my story by talking about salary first and then non-salary expense lines. So starting with salary, that is a key reason for why we're seeing our expenditures moving slower. The bulk of our salary, 65% of our salary budget, is professional salaries for teachers and others professionals in that category that are on the teacher paycheck cycle received 8 checks this year as opposed to 9 checks by the January 1st threshold last year. So that explains that, and we're going to catch up as we close the fiscal year. So that's that story and the swing in salaries. The other important thing that happened here is our turnover was relatively healthy, but we spent some of it with 2 general education aides in particular that we had to hire and staff in the beginning of the year. This reflected the story you've been hearing over and over again, that kindergarten enrollment was higher than anticipated and didn't align with the census at all. So we had to adjust for that. We've budgeted for those aides in next year's budget, so we're hopefully not going to have that same pressure next time around. We also increased the ELL teacher from a 0.9 to a 1.0 based on the students that we saw and the coverage that we needed there. So we spent some of that turnover. The net turnover after those moves was 170,000 in that ballpark. And that's what I would use as I close the fiscal year to absorb some of the other pressures that I see in the non-salary expense lines. So on that side of the house, you do see that our expenditures are in some cases a little bit higher than they were at this time last year. But the story is not really different. Every year it's the same kind of story. So we're seeing pressure in student services and contracted services category. This is for specialized services that wouldn't make sense to fund through an in-house staff. So we do have an overage there, and the overage is about $350K, much better than last year. In tuition and other expenses, our overage is about $214,000. In the big scheme of things, given the size of the tuition budget, that's not out of the ordinary. And I'd say so far, I would foresee that we'd be able to absorb that through turnover and through so what happens is there are encumbrances and there are planned expenditures that sometimes never materialize. So other things that are like liquidated as we close the fiscal year may help us absorb that overage. That would be my plan at this point, given where we are. So of course, with volatility in special education, that number could shift between now and June 30th. So we'll watch that to see if it changes and increases. And the last thing I would highlight is that we are seeing pressures in other non-salary expense lines, facilities expenses, subscription costs, dues and memberships. So this is the story of the inflation rate that we saw last year, that like 9%. And, we saw the OSD rate at, increase of 14%, which was imposed on us, but we have to make an elective decision to start to respond to the market pressures as they ripple through other subscription costs and vendor contracts and all this and that. So I'm seeing companies now start to charge us those rates, and, in some places, the way that departments respond is that they have less purchasing power. Their money is depleted, so they can't buy as much. And that's difficult. We hear that from the science department, for example, material costs have increased. So they have, their dollars don't go as far as they used to. In other areas, we just don't have the option to reduce our spending because it might be a legal obligation or it's a safety thing, so we just spend the money anyway. Let's say we need new walkies, right? So we need to replace that device because it's a critical unit for our school leadership team. Right, so these are purchases we continue to make. We see deficits on those lines, and the sum total of what I'm seeing there is about $250,000. Again, I do think I'll be able to absorb that as we close the fiscal year through other encumbrances and planned expenditures that won't pan out as expected. But I'll continue to update you as the year draws to a close. I'd say those are the highlights. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks, Lama.
Thank you, Emma. We're now going to move into the conversation about Pine Hill. So on Tuesday night, I know, Maya, you and I were here in this room, along with Rob Fitzgerald from Durham Whittier. Thank you to Josh and to Donna, and thank you particularly to Josh, who's been shepherding this project through a whole lot of ups and downs over the last, I was going to say it seems like forever, but I guess over the time that he's been doing this, because he's been doing incredible work behind the scenes, and I want to give him a special shout out for that. When we met here on Tuesday night, I think it was a little frustrating for both you and me, Maya, to want to be, and for you as well, Josh, to want to be able to give more specifics to families. But when we last met in this room as a school committee, we provided the update that what had happened related to the power outages in December, the loss of all the chillers and compressors inside of the building. We continue to put on a brave face in the community and say that we're moving forward, but behind the scenes there was a lot of uncertainty about whether or not we were going to hit the move-in date on time. I am happy to say that as of a meeting at 3:30 this afternoon, it is all systems go. We are scheduled to move in on time during February vacation. So I am happy to say that publicly for the first time. It just feels good to be able to say that. We've been and actually mean it and know it. So that's a really great and exciting thing. So with that, I just want to provide some highlights about some upcoming dates related to this. So the final day for students at the Hanlon and Deerfield campuses will be next Friday, February 16th. The move will happen during February vacation. The official teacher unpacking day will be Monday, February 26th. That's a no-school day for students at Pine Hill. The first full day for students at Pine Hill will be Tuesday, February 27th. There is going to be, during the time period between when the move ends into Pine Hill, we are going to take anything that's usable for furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, repurpose it from the Hanlon School to other schools. I think the one that's easiest to talk about is the fact that we had lost our art room at Downey a number of years ago. There's art furniture at Hanlon that we will bring over to Downey to recreate an art room at Downey. That's great. But anything that's usable, from that to all the technology that's in the building, we're going to make sure that we repurpose elsewhere in the district. There is going to be an opportunity for a final farewell event for the Hanlon School on Saturday, March 2nd. That will take place from 4 to 7 p.m. And then effective March 4th, and this committee's got a couple of votes they need to take from a procedural level later on today, the Hanlon will be turned over to begin the abatement and demolition process on Monday, March 4th. Regarding this timeline, I'm going to be sending an email out to all families in the district tomorrow morning that will talk about these steps. I know for Pine Hill families, Josh is going to follow up with an email with some more logistical details for Pine Hill families tomorrow afternoon, because we want to make sure that now that it is official, we didn't want to put dates out in the ether that we were worried that we might have to pull back from, but we are all systems going. I'm really, really incredibly excited and happy to say that. The other thing that is not on this list that was another piece of good news, because the news over the last couple of days has been really positive, and Maya, during her update, will give a ton of credit to all the people that we need to thank for getting us across the finish line. On Tuesday night, we were uncertain with Pine Hill families about whether or not we were going to be able to schedule any tours inside the building. It's obviously is a concern for families. Parents are anxious, kids are anxious. We are committed to being able to schedule something. We don't know the details on exactly when for days, but we do have the clearance to be able to schedule that, and that'll be part of our communication, at least that we are doing it even if we don't have the days identified tomorrow. So
Prior to the move-in.
prior to the moving, yes, thank you. Yeah, not sometime. I mean, we're doing like an official ribbon cutting in April,
Yeah.
but for Pine Hill families to be able to get in prior to the first day of school on February 27th, we're really excited about being able to do that opportunity. So, with that being said, I love pictures. Pictures tell a million words. So, some of these pictures I want to thank Josh, who had shared these at the Pine Hill presentation. This is the drive coming up to Pine Hill. This is the front entrance when you get a little bit closer. All these pictures are within the very recent past. This is the playground, what it looks like back behind the building. And then this is a close-up of the playground that is going to be a great structure for kids over at Pine Hill. Inside of the building, this is the main lobby area. Now that I know it's been a little bit since the committee's been there as well too, and I think we'll be talking with you guys about scheduling a time for all of you to kind of get in as well. But this is what it looks like with actual furniture in there as well too. So the main entrance is to your left. When you is that right? Yeah, the main entrance is to your left when you're looking at this picture. The gymnasium is behind us in this picture, and the cafeteria is to your right, and then the academic wing is straight ahead, or academic wings are straight ahead. This is the cafeteria with cafeteria tables in there, along with a stage you can see over there on the left-hand side. And the playground is behind the windows there, so students can exit from the cafeteria, go to recess, and then come into the building. This is the gallery area, so this is the start of the academic part of the building. It is the kindergarten wing down that hallway that you see on the first floor, and the first grade wing that you see up above that on the second floor. This is one of the gen ed classrooms, all furnished out. I would imagine that once teachers get in there, they're going to start moving furniture around for how they want their classrooms to look. And then this is one of our sub-separate classrooms over in the building as well too, just to show a couple of different settings of furniture within the building. This is the library. This is also adjacent to both the STEM room and the art room. But this is the first floor of the library. There's a second floor of it up above. And this looks out onto the steam porch, which is basically right up against the woods on the south side of the building. And you can see the steam porch there sticking out from the building as well. These were pictures we did not have Tuesday night. I got these earlier this morning. So this is the gym floor installed over at Pine Hill. So it's great to see that as a sizable gymnasium, big enough that we can run 2 PE classes in there simultaneously. And then in background, you can see the branded bleachers with the Westwood W logo on them. And this is just kind of what those look like up close and pulled out as well. So it's great to see that. This picture was shared, and this is the kind of thing that we will send out to families. This is what the traffic flow is going to look like in the building during this next phase while the demolition project is taking place. There's 2 separate walker entrances, one from the north, one from the south. One of the great things that happens when you have a new building is you're actually able to segregate bus traffic from parent drop-off traffic. It's much safer. And then for the walkers themselves, they don't have to cross any roads between the building and Gay Street, which is a very nice thing to have. This is a picture of Pine Hill all lit up at night. If you've driven by at night, hopefully you've been able to see that maybe from a little bit further away. And then the last picture I want to share. I get to be here to kind of bring the ball across the finish line, but a ton of credit needs to be given to Emily Parks, who's obviously there with me. I don't know when this picture was taken. Probably
This was Tuesday.
This was Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I give her a ton of credit for all the work that she did regarding this project. So I thought this was a good way to end the picture show here this evening. So. With that being said, I'm sorry I gave the preview of what was coming next, and that's a surprise to you, Sean. My apologies, I went one slide too far. But I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments that the committee has about this, knowing that Maya will also give a little more update during her part of the agenda.
I could give it now.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I mean, really, the only thing I wanted to say is that, having your HVAC system fail like 2 weeks before, or you're really starting to ramp up was pretty catastrophic from our perspective. And the fact, there are so many people we have to thank for getting that back up. This is going to sound a little like an Oscar speech. But first and foremost, we have to thank NB Kenny, who is the subcontractor who's working on this, because they were able, so we had, as I said last month, we had 2 condensers, each of them had 6 compressors. All of the compressors failed, so we lost 12 compressors. NB Kenny somehow located 12 replacement compressors, which typically have a lead time of 9 months. They located 12 of them and had them delivered within 2 weeks to the site. So they are heroic. I don't know how they did it, but we have to thank them. I have to thank Brate Brothers, Vertex, and Doran Whittier, our dream project team. They worked overtime. They worked on weekends. They were constantly in meetings trying to figure out what happened, how to replicate it, how to fix it. Because there's 2 issues, right? First, you have to fix the problem and get the HVAC back up and running, but you also have to diagnose it to make sure it doesn't happen on a going forward basis. So they were doing that 24 hours a day and completing the building. Again, don't know how they did it. We actually reached out to Representative Paul McMurtry, State Senator Mike Rush, and Senator Ed Markey and their offices because we needed some assistance moving certain portions of this review along. And all 3 of them, particularly Ed Markey's office, helped us tremendously with this, trying to get this back up and running. Tom Philbin, our town energy manager, was critical, particularly with the solution. So we thank Tom for that. And finally, Josh, who lived with uncertainty and lots of questions coming at him all the time. Thank you for your patience. And finally, the PBC, and particularly John Cummings, who really drove this. And I can't even stress to you how amazing it is that we are making this February move-in date, given what happened at the beginning of January. So I really just wanted to do a special call out to all those people.
Can we add you to that list?
Yeah.
You carried this also.
I was not critical to this
Oh my gosh,
solution,
you were.
honestly. It was like, it was all happening around me, and I was just stressing. That's all I did.
Even for that.
Josh, do you have an addition here?
Can I just jump in for one quick
Yeah.
second? 2 quick things. One logistical thing, just a reminder also that next Friday is an early release
Yes.
date for all Deerfield and Hanlon students as part of that packing plan. But also wanted to just take a moment to also make sure we thank Matt Cooklins, who not only was a wonderful school leader for Hanlon for the past 2 years, but also just did a tremendous amount of work over that period of time on the project as well.
Thank you, and it's all Josh.
So, and I'm just going to repeat that for anybody that's watching this at home that the mics may not have picked that up. So just as a reminder that next Friday is an early release day for both the Hanlon and Deerfield campuses related to packing up. Josh Baumer made a particular point to thank Matt Kuklins for his leadership over at Hanlon, and Matt made a particular point to kick it back to Josh. So I think that recapped what just happened here in the room. So.
Okay.
Okay.
You can now.
Yeah, no, this is great news, and then I'm just going to give this is a surprise. It's not a surprise because I accidentally just previewed it, but a special shout out to our student rep Sean Tao, who is taking his talents off to Ithaca next year. So congratulations on Cornell, and I know you're going to do great things there, Sean.
Thank you so much.
And so that is the end of the superintendent's report for this evening.
Great, thank you. All very exciting. Okay, great. So now it's time for public participation. This is the one meeting that's a little bit different, in that we really have 2 opportunities for public participation. There's going to be a budget hearing that we're going to open in a few minutes. So if you have any comments on the budget, if you could just hold off till then. But if you want to talk about any other topic, you can talk during public participation. Per our policy, you have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes to speak. We just ask that you state your name and address. And per our policy, we don't, we listen to input. We don't directly respond. So let me see. Is there anyone who wants to talk during public participation? Okay. And like I said, if you have anything on the budget, we'll open that up in like about 5 minutes. Okay. Seeing none, why don't we move on? So now we're up to the school committee updates, reports. Just a couple brief things. On the budget, it's moving along. We met with the FinCom subcommittee right before then. Tim and I will be at the meeting on Monday night. We're not with the municipal and the school budget is shared, so we're continuing that process. And then I think that's all I had from that perspective. The other thing I did put it on here, school committee norms. So if you remember, back during our summer outing, we talked about norms. We took some notes. I do want to kind of wrap that up before I hand over the gavel. So Joanna's agreed to kind of work with me on kind of getting a draft of that revised that we'll talk about next in March. So
Great.
I just want to clear that up. Any other reports from anybody?
I'll just go do a quick, so CPAC has been, and for those who are listening who don't know, CPAC is the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, has been doing a really nice job over the last, I would say, few years, but in particular this year of doing some outreach and workshopping and parent coffees to try to really connect the community together of families and caregivers who have children with special needs. And so I just wanted to give a plug for their website, which is westwoodcpac.org. They are definitely, seeking additional participation, and there are plenty of ways to, if you're a parent or a caregiver out there who is looking for additional support for your child who has an IEP or a 504, they're certainly having coffees and many events that folks are welcome to attend.
Great, thank you, Dory. Anything else? Okay, great. We will move on to discussion items. The first one is the fiscal year 25 budget hearing. I think we need a motion to open up the budget hearing. Do I have a motion to open the public budget hearing?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed, none. All right, we are open for the public hearing. So anyone who's interested in making a comment on the budget, if you could just, again, come down right here, state your name and address, that would be appreciated. Is there anyone interested in making a comment on the budget? Come on.
Is there like a ticking clock, or should I just?
I'll moderate it. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Pickering. I live 170 School Street here in Westwood. So I'm going to talk on the topic of the cuts to the music program as part of the 2025 budget. I'm going to focus on two things. One is what I think is a flawed process that was used to make those evaluations and recommendations. And the second is what I think is a material downgrade in the outcomes for our students. So when organizations and towns enact change, those responsible for approving that change, such as the school committee, should have confidence in two things. One, they should have confidence in the process that was used. There should be supporting data and analysis, and probably more importantly, the input of the subject matter experts, as similar to the digital learning that we heard about earlier. And two, the proposal should actually work in the real world and produce the intended outcomes. I think that these two criteria were not met when we consider the proposed changes to the music program. As such, I think the school committee should ask some serious questions around those changes and the process that was used. On the first point around this process, I think the school committee should be asking questions about what analysis was done, who was included in the process, how inclusive that process was the music department head, were any of the musical experts who understand the current curriculum involved at all in that process. I think they should ask those questions because I don't know how you could have a satisfactory outcome without including the people who understand the topics and how things are structured the best. I think the school committee should also ask the administration whether any alternative proposals were proposed after the official budget was published, and whether that was seriously considered at all after the experts were actually invited to comment on the proposal, and see whether there was any sort of analysis or reaction once that was received. On the second point as to whether this can actually work as intended, I'll raise two concerns. One is just an example of how I don't think this can work. So if you look at the fourth grade band, currently there's an average of 12 students to 1 instructor. Under the proposed changes, that would go from a 25-to-1 ratio. And if you can imagine learning a new instrument with that sort of support, I imagine as a fourth grader that you would feel pretty frustrated, lost, and probably unsuccessful in that sort of environment. And then the second concern is given how this would all work, there's a reduction in a position, people would be moving around. You would no longer have those that are specialized in a given type of music, instrument, or whatever, necessarily teaching the students who are enrolled in that class. And we all know that those sorts of mismatches are not ideal for our children or for their music education. Just think about having a science teacher teach math. It's related, there's related concepts, but it's not the best outcome for the students, right? So, in summary, I think, one, the plan was not well thought through and not inclusive. The process was not inclusive enough to develop a plan that can actually work. And I think, two, that's going to lead to a major decline in the outcomes for our students. So, if I were a student committee member, and I really respect the role that you all have, I would make sure I'd have answers to those questions before feeling confident in moving forward in this. The digital learning, and I'm glad I was able to witness that. That seemed like a really inclusive process. The experts were involved, really incorporated trends going on with technology. I don't think any of that happened as it came to making decisions about music. So I think it deserves a fair shake.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Tom.
Anyone else want to comment on the budget? Okay. Seeing none. I do have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. So why don't we go through the extended day? We will talk about, and then talk about the budget in the context, in a few minutes, and kind of, talk about that. So, but why don't we go through the next two parts?
Yeah, sure, thank you. So as part of the tonight's agenda, we had talked back in the fall around extended day. I think as I identified this through my entry plan as one of the challenges we had in the district. And I just sort of wanted to talk about, we had committed to examining that process to create a more transparent and equitable process for families. These are just some of the concerns that were raised about the existing process, a general lack of transparency about how slots are allocated and about the capacity of the program. The registration process, that was essentially the Taylor Swift ticket model that depended upon whether or not you got online at the right time as to whether or not you got access. There was a real concern about families that were new to the district being shut out entirely from the process because slots were allocated first to families that were grandfathered. There were challenges around siblings not being able to gain access to the same days. My 5th grade child has access on Thursdays, but my 2nd grade child only has access on Tuesdays. That really doesn't work for me as a parent or as a family. As well as, and we were never really able to sort of get clear data around this, but this concept of squatting of days for students that signed up but did not attend. I think that's something I heard repeatedly. And so the process that we're proposing here, knowing that we have limitations in the capacity of the program because of both staffing concerns and space concerns, there's no solution that's going to satisfy all needs for all families. And I continue to be hopeful that there is something that can happen in the community that increases the broader community-based supply of after-school care for kids. But given that, we need to do what we can do to make our process more equitable and transparent. So the process we're proposing here is designed to better address those needs. So these are the guidelines that we're going to use. So the first thing is that we want to we do believe in continuity of extended day program access for families. And so we're going to set aside a portion of available slots for families currently enrolled in the program. But because we also want to promote fair access to the program, we will set aside a portion of slots in all grades, but particularly kindergarten for families that are new to extended day. That's one of the things that we heard in particular is a family where their oldest may be in kindergarten may not be able to gain access because there were so many kindergarten kids that had older siblings that were already in the program and so denied access for those families coming in. So we want to make sure that we set aside a portion of slots for new families. In terms of not doing the first come, first serve on a timestamp model, we're going to institute an impartial lottery. We're going to have the lottery open for about a week. The registration for the lottery open for about a week so that anybody that signs up during that week will have a lottery number assigned impartially. Lottery numbers to promote the sibling registration piece will be assigned by family and not by individual student. So that if you have I keep saying a 5th grader and a 2nd grader, your 5th grader is at lottery slot 3 and your 2nd grader is slot 74, right? That really does not make sense. So we would assign lottery slots by families. There may be times though and we would fill lottery slot 1, we fill in what's there, then 2, then 3. There may be times when because just how things are assigned, how the lottery falls, When there might be a space open in one grade but not in another, we would give the family a choice at that point when their number comes up. You know, do you take the slot that's available for your one child or for your two children and not have it be consistent for everybody, or do you just put everybody on the wait list together? There's really no other way to do that in that scenario. We do need to have a cap on enrollment at each school, at each site, and that any families that are not enrolled would be placed on a wait list based on initial lottery results. As I mentioned, we would have the lottery registration open for a week. Anybody who registers after that week, we would then use a timestamp model to assign them. They would go sort of at the back of the lottery, at the back of the wait list once it's open for a while. It's consistent with standard industry practice for school-based after-school programs. We have talked about issues with, I mean, Lemma actually just talked about turnover related to staffing. We need to cap spring enrollment at 75% of current enrollment just to make sure that we are not allocating spots that we aren't guaranteed that we can fill. So we're going to do that in the spring, but then additional slots as we can solidify our staffing will become available in late summer and early fall, and we would fill those through the wait lists. And the wait lists would be determined by initial lottery numbers, so there'd be clarity and transparency throughout that entire process. The other thing around the squatting piece is that we want to make sure that extended day slots are used by kids and families that are actually there. So we're keeping a 75% cumulative attendance threshold for students. What that means is we would look at the end of each month. We do want to treat this on a case-by-case basis, so in case there is, you know, a significant illness or there is something like that, we don't want to, you know, this is not a shell, but if we find that there are situations where families are using slots not for the purpose of childcare, we want to make sure that we open up those slots for the purpose of childcare. And so we would, that spot may be forfeit and offered to the next family on the wait list. And then in terms of tuition rates, you know, there was a significant increase in rates that this committee made a year ago because we were operating at a deficit. What we're proposing is a 5%, and I would say that we've addressed the deficit, but we don't have any kind of a surplus to absorb unforeseen costs. So while we've recommended a 3% increase in like tuition rates or bus fees or athletic fees, we're recommending 5% for extended day, just because we need to make sure that we have a buffer in the revolving account there for extended day, and those rates are there. So that was a real quick kind of run through that, but I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that the committee has, knowing that the timing for when we would put this out would be around the same time as kindergarten registration, so that we can do this sort of simultaneously for all families K-5 in the district.
When is that?
Usually early March.
Right.
Yeah. Right after the February vacation.
Question to comment?
I think this looks really great. Thank you for all the work everybody put into it. One thing I would love to see, and I don't know if any other committee members agree, but you kind of touched on it, Tim, is when parents register, that they certify that they need it for childcare. So that way those families get priority. I'm not saying that children who are needing socialization should be blocked from the program, but maybe those would be the ones that would be on the wait list.
I'm just pausing to let others respond, because that was more of a statement than a question, so I wanted to just hear from other committee members.
I don't want to comment on that. I'd like to ask a question, but
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the technology needed for such a lottery system. Do we need to invest in some software? Is there a way to systematize this so that we have a robust registration system in place?
Yeah, I mean, the registration system, essentially the overlay of a lottery on it, I mean, there are high-tech ways of doing it that cost money. Mm-hmm. At the very least, the low-tech ways is you get a random number generator and you assign random numbers on a spreadsheet, right? That's the really low-tech way of doing a lottery, and you publicize it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, some of those, obviously we wanted to get some commitment from the committee that we're sort of heading in the right direction before we fully invest in what that solution is going to be. But that's sort of the range of how that can be considered. It can be from no cost to some cost.
Yeah. I think that when we heard from the community, we heard two issues, right? The registration process and the capacity process issue. And to your point, we're very limited on the capacity. I think this goes a long way to addressing the concerns from the registration. I think, you know, what we heard at public participation and also just anecdotally was a lot of the angst was about, you know, pulling over on the side of the road to make that 10 a.m. thing and trying to log in. So we've eliminated that, which is great. Also the issue of all of, you know, I can't even get in and I'm a first-time family. We're solving partly for that. So I think this is a great step. I definitely think we should move forward with this. I also agree with the tuition rate increase. I do think it's, I mean, for so long we were operating it as a deficit, and the one thing I think a lot of us felt on the committee was that this should not be impacting the operating budget in any way, this service that we provide. So I love that we're, we're sort of at even, but I agree that we need a surplus, even if it's nominal, but just something, a little bit of a cushion. So overall, I think this is a great direction. It's not going to satisfy everyone because we have the capacity issue, but I think it goes a long way in addressing the concerns we heard.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you said. I think it's something that maybe that I've heard comments about throughout the course of over the last maybe 8 to 9 months is around the capacity issue, and I think there might be a misunderstanding. I think that some folks believe that the school is open fully, right, for the extended day programs. And I just want to clarify that, as we mentioned last spring when we did this deep dive into the extended day program, the extended day uses the larger spaces in the school, not the classroom spaces. Sometimes teachers stay late. There's also materials in the classroom that they don't want to have disturbed. And so the program is really confined to like cafeteria, gym, outside, so larger spaces, and you really can't, it's not safe to put the number of students that go to school all day long into just like the gym, right? That's just not, I mean, if anybody can picture that, it would be disastrous. So, I think that's a misunderstanding that some folks have around the capacity that I just wanted to sort of clarify. The other thing I will say is that, I looked at the rate today with the 5%, and I didn't see it in your presentation, but I thought it was actually remarkable that even with the 5% increase, and not to advertise low pricing, but like $8.19 per hour for childcare, I feel like is very reasonable. I mean, there's a couple of parents here, like, I don't know that any of us pay that for a babysitter, right? I don't even think I pay that for a mother's helper. So I think that is very reasonable, even with the 5% increase, I think. So I'm in support.
Appreciate it. Can I just add one comment to your piece about capacity? Mm-hmm. The other thing too, and because I had shared this, and this seemed to be an aha moment for some people when I had conversations this fall, it's not just what spaces, but also that the staffing ratios by regulation are inherently different for in-school programming and after-school programming. So that also has an impact on our capacity.
Very good point.
And also we need to kind of clean and maintain buildings too. I mean, we need our operations crew needs access, and there's kind of limited time. They need to get in, get trash, get everything cleaned up, and so having extended day where it is sort of an efficiency thing for that to be able to kind of keep up the investment in the community. Right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I do sort of echo sort of Joanna's question and concern around the how the lottery will take place, and so that it's efficient and not so that you can get back to families on time. Absolutely. Without someone pulling their hair out, going crazy over spreadsheets, whoever that might be. Because that sounds very stressful.
Yeah, that's the next phase of the process for us, right? Is I'm certainly getting directional support. I also don't want to forget Amanda's comment around whether or not we want, and so to get some feedback collectively from the committee, I think would be valuable for me on that front. But that's the next phase for us from a logistics implementation standpoint, is to figure out what the right mechanism is for the lottery and for communication around it.
Can I ask another question? I believe it's been a while since. First of all, I'm still on the wait list for the extended day myself. So, but is extended day? Can you do just one day, and can that one day be Wednesday, or do we want to get?
Yeah.
Into that
So we're not changing that. So you can do one day, but you cannot do only Wednesday.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any reflections on Amanda's comments? I mean, I guess my reflection is it's just hard to. I mean, it's
People have to be. They would just check a box and certify. We're taking people at their word.
Yeah.
We're not going to ask for proof of employment or anything.
Yeah.
But I do think, given the capacity issues, that people who need childcare should be prioritized.
I agree with you. I just don't know how to enforce it.
We'd have to take parents at their word and hope that everybody's honest.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is putting some kind of a statement on the form that says, please understand that the intention of the Westwood Public Schools Extended Day Program is to support families that need after-school care for child care purposes. We ask you to please check this box to certify that this is for necessary child care purposes.
I guess
Yeah.
I would just, I'm not necessarily opposed. I would just think, did we decide that?
Well, that's why I'm asking the question, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Have we ever made that statement that
Not
it's,
previously.
that it's
No.
just for, so I guess that's something.
Well, I
Right.
don't think we're saying it's just for childcare. It's just the people who need it for childcare would be prioritized. So we're not saying you can't apply, you can never get
Right.
in. But in terms of the wait list, prioritizing people that need it for childcare.
Yeah.
So I could amend what I just said to basically say, please check this box if this is for childcare. I think at the same time, though, we need to be transparent, that if you don't check the box, you're going to be at the bottom of the wait list, and I think everybody will then check the box, right? I just kind of want to be,
Yeah.
acknowledge sort of what this looks like.
Right.
But it also sends a message, right? And I think there is something about sending a message through the way that we do registration, if that is the actual intent, right? Which is your
And I
point,
think
Mayor,
there
right?
would be some like social pressure. Families kind of know who's working, who's not. So I would think that would lead people to want to be honest.
Dynamic up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we would be creating a dynamic where we're pitting families against each other.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna be in a situation where people are calling the schools and saying so-and-so is extended day and they're not working.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think we never really made that a component of extended day, and if we're going to do that, I think we need to be a little bit more thoughtful about, like, we need to actually think about that, and discuss it a little bit more. That's all I'm saying. Like I
Yeah.
said, I'm not necessarily against it, but I don't think we've had that conversation.
Okay.
I wonder if the suggestion of if a child misses or doesn't send their child, or a family doesn't send their child so many days, you sort of lose your spot. And if that's a way to
Right.
kind of get at the same thing, if a family is just using, not just, it's an important thing to have a family, to use extended day for social purposes, but if that's the purpose, if they have more flexibility, they might not tend to send their child for every single day,
Right.
or every day that they're signed up for. So maybe
That could.
but then that might mitigate some of this. But I
And
hear the
agree with
concern.
that, right, I agree, if you're not using the service and there's a wait list, then you shouldn't, you
You're
should be
holding a spot.
told,
Right.
if you don't use the service, you're gonna lose the service, right? I definitely agree with that. I'm just a little concerned as, like, what if somebody signs up and they have a job and then 3 months in they get laid off?
Right. We're not checking it. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be
Right, I just.
checking it. My intention was to put it out there and take people at their word, thinking that people aren't going to lie. I think that, from an equity perspective, if we have people that are really counting on this affordable childcare, they should be prioritized over people who don't need it. And if there's a way we can make that happen, I think, it
Yeah, I
could be
just-
impactful. But
I guess I hesitate because I feel like we're imposing a set of judgments on what should be a very impartial process. That's why I'm concerned, because someone might not work but might still need daycare, right? And we don't know the circumstances of all of the families. And I just think that, like I said, my fear is that we're setting up a situation where parents are going to, I don't know. I think we need, at least I need to think about it a little
Okay.
bit
All right,
more.
so maybe more, takeaway, but maybe
All right.
we don't need to.
Yeah, so I mean, what I'm sort of hearing in the conversation is that it may be premature to include that in this year's registration process. And maybe something the committee may want to entertain in the future, depending upon how this plays out for future iterations. Is that kind of consistent with what I'm hearing? Are people comfortable with that around the table?
Just because timeline-wise.
I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just
because
gonna
we
say-
need to make a decision
Right.
quickly
That's
around
fine.
this, right?
I think
So
families would
I want to be able to
appreciate
move forward.
us getting
so.
moving.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, otherwise, the proposal I think is great.
All right, thank you, I appreciate
All
it.
right. Is that everything extended day?
That's everything in extended day?
So why don't we're gonna get into action, why don't we kind of just, we do have approval of the budget. But I just want to kind of go around and, we got some feedback today. I know we had gotten some written feedback about the change to specials. I didn't know, if there were any reflections or comments the committee had on, or thoughts, just overall on the budget, any final questions or observations on the budget?
I think it's a really hard balance, right? and that we as a school district have always valued, you know, the arts, right? And I think bringing back the library falls into that category at the middle school. This is difficult because, you know, on the one hand, we have always made that a priority and we've invested in that, and the fact that our kids have been able to have general music and take an instrument has been, you know, really remarkable. On the other hand, I see the need for DLCS, and we have a limited day. And I don't know, you know, and I think, Tim, you had said the other night at Pine Hill, like, right now we have 2 of one and 0 of the other, and we're just trying to do 1 and 1. And I see the need for, very much for DLCS, particularly in those, you know, 3 to 5, 2 to 5 grades, because there is that gap that I mentioned, and that's a little worrying. And then I just worry that they're not fully prepared for, you know, like now my youngest is in computer science in 6th grade, and it's like a whole new world for him. And I think if he could have had more exposure in elementary school, he would have found that new world earlier. But there's a sacrifice, and we have to acknowledge that. We can't say that, you know. And I think to the points heard today, is the sacrifice worth it? It sounds like, I guess for me, it sounds like it is, but that doesn't mean it's an easy decision, right? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in an ideal world, right, we'd have enough time to offer everything and offer it
Right.
multiple times, right? But then we'd be sacrificing kind of the you know, the other
core,
academic pieces, right? Yeah, that is, you know, valued by everyone, kind of no matter what you do for a living. Could you maybe we know what the plan is. Could you talk a little bit more about how you arrived at that plan? You know, maybe give us a little bit of the background.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here, right? I think one is, I want to acknowledge that 2 things are simultaneously true, right? One is that it has been part of the strategic priorities for the district as part of the strategic plan that was implemented and adopted by the committee in 2021 to look at elementary specials as a whole. At the same time, I've also identified that plan was not necessarily socialized among staff in the way where that was internalized, right? And I think that as we look at the next iteration of our strategic planning process, which will begin this spring, that's really important and critical to me to make sure that that process is inclusive, has district admin, school admin, teachers, students, parents, community members as part of the process envisioning, right? And that's some of the work that we'll do going forward. So despite the fact that those things are true simultaneously, we ultimately are in a place where we need to make a decision. Part of it is knowing what was happening with the Pine Hill consolidation. There was going to be some level of FTE reduction that was going to happen in the specials regardless. Because of the consolidation of buildings, because of for example, elimination of travel time. As we look at how elementary specials are structured, it's, you know, I've said this to staff, there's no way for me to say this without sounding heartless when I say it, but part of my job as superintendent is to find efficiencies in our staffing models to make sure that we're using our resources as appropriately as possible to make sure that we're able to deliver services to kids. So there would have been some level of FTE. How that FTE reduction was allocated may have been different, or would have been different, right, had we not looked at the model as a whole. Given the fact that we needed to find those savings, given the fact that we were looking at that FTE reduction, we said that we were going to take advantage of the opportunity, consistent with the strategic priorities, to look at the delivery of elementary specials as a whole. One of the challenges in this process was, and Tony, you and I sat together through the budget process, and you heard me talk about this at the December school committee meeting. We were having some challenges getting concrete enough information for us to be able to move in a manner related to the budget that gave us some targets in a timely manner that would have allowed for a more inclusive process of decision making, right? So I want to acknowledge that sort of external piece that was a part of that. Ultimately, when push came to shove, the first thing I will say is the recommendation of the budget, the buck stops here, right? I mean, I own that. I make the decision that ultimately comes forth to the committee. That decision in this case was made with input from the members of the admin council, Particularly, I sat with the folks in our CO6 team with elementary principals about how we looked at the elementary scheduling. We were not able to move to another level than that, sort of in the process and in the time frame in which we had. But that just, I think that answered your question about around our process perspective on that.
And the implementation piece, has that been thoroughly
Yeah, so
scheduled and vetted and looked at numbers and?
yeah, so there are we have our initial we know that it can work with what we've had, right? And so I've been going around and doing, but we've met with the music department, I've met with, I'll use this as I terms. I've met with the music department, I've met with the art department, I've done budget meetings at all the schools, gotten feedback from the various schools. I can think of one school in particular where, staff members said, if we propose something else to you, will you listen? And my answer is absolutely, right? We have constraints regarding the budget, right? And those are, which creates constraints related to staffing. The delivery of how we use those constraints to deliver services for kids, I'm always going to be open to see if there's a better way to make that happen than what my initial thoughts are. Now, just because I'm presented with something, I may not agree with what that solution is because it may have other contradictory effects. But the how that's ultimately implemented, I had talked about, we're able to create common planning time. We talked about a cohort model in grade 4. There may be, once we do student registration for instruments in grade 3, we may find some logistical challenges with that, which means we need to adjust what that looks like. We know that we have enough staffing to be able to deliver that. And if we have to change the how a little bit, then we'll be flexible enough at that point in time to be able to do that with the input of the people that are involved.
I echo, Maya, what you said. These are hard decisions, and as a parent of a child who's deeply invested in the music curriculum and has benefited greatly from the music curriculum in Westwood, it saddens me that these are the tough choices we have to make. But when I think about the benefits of shared curriculum time or shared prep time and planning time across cohorts, the opportunity for students to be exposed to computer science, especially to uncover and discover something that they might not even realize they had an interest in at an earlier age, to explore that and to be able to build on that, just like we do with music. We introduce music at an earlier age so that they can build and explore that interest. The same opportunity should exist for other parts of, interests, other interest areas. And so they're just because these are the types of challenges we're presented with, that doesn't make the decision easier, but I understand the direction strategically of where we're going.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that, and I was remiss in my comments a minute ago to not acknowledge. I mean, there's a very human impact to these decisions, right? And I want to make sure that I acknowledge that. And these are not decisions that I relish making either, but ultimately I have a professional responsibility to make my recommendations, and the 5 of you have a professional responsibility as committee members to act on those recommendations. So. Yeah.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna, you're right, there is a human impact. And I think about what the human impact is to the students not having this information as well, right? The DLCS piece, right? I think that we've all sat up here and discussed and heard from members of the administration the impacts of technology on our kids, and thinking about how we can help them be safer and more mindful about how they're using technology. And so I guess I think about that human impact as well, right? The impact that it's having on our kids to be able to provide them with kind of this knowledge to take forward with them out into the world. And I think if we can start that earlier, that would be helpful. I dislike that it comes at a cost of something else, but I realize that, yeah, I mean, the discussion we have every year around budget is that there is just the one pie, and it's unfortunate.
And I mean, the biggest constraint, I think, time, we've always talked about time.
Right. Yeah.
Time is, it's not just
Right.
it's
That's
only
true.
6
Very true.
hours and 20 minutes in a day.
I would just like to add, I am disappointed in the process, and Tim, I think you just explained kind of the how and the why behind that. I do wish that it had been more collaborative and inclusive. So I think there are some lessons to take away there. I know over the course of the fall, I took time speaking with different district leaders about technology. And it became apparent to me quickly that we really need to start the technology education earlier, in the kind of early-ish elementary school grades. And I do feel a sense of urgency surrounding that, particularly as it ties into kids' mental health. I think everybody knows that so many kids are struggling right now. And I think everybody would probably agree that social media and cyberbullying and all those things have an impact. So that's why I'm really disappointed by having to make this trade, but I do feel a sense of urgency to enhance the technology education. I feel like that would be kind of in the best interest of the students at this point.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Okay, great. Thanks for that conversation. Great. So I think we will now move into the action items. And the first one we can do simply, then I've asked Amanda to help me on, there's some specific motions for the other ones. But the first one is just the approval of the January 18th, 2024 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. And then we'll go, next one is the vote to approve the fiscal year 25 extended day raise. I think that might be a specific motion.
Yes. I move to approve the extended day tuition increase to $8.19 an hour and to apply the new hourly rate to all offerings, including the before-school programming and other vacation programming.
Great, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous. The next is approval of the fiscal year 2025 budget. I think there's two line items. One is the operating and one is the capital.
Move to approve the Westwood Public Schools fiscal year 2025 operating budget in the amount of $56,763,603.
Second.
Second thing, any further discussion on the budget?
The only thing I want to get on the record is how proud I am to say that we're getting a director of HR as part of this process. I know we had a somber moment, but I think we should celebrate, and there's a lot to celebrate in the budget, and I think that's one of the highlights, so I just wanted to call attention to that.
Thank you for that. Thanks. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? None. Unanimous. The next one is the capital budget. Is there a motion there on the capital?
I move to approve the Westwood Public Schools fiscal year 2025 capital budget in the amount of $1,017,000.
Second.
17,000.
17,000, sorry.
Yeah, I don't want you to short us, Amanda.
Sorry, difference.
1,000, sorry.
Any discussion on the capital? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous. The next, there's a couple motions on the Hanlon.
Yeah. I move that effective March 2nd, 2024, any furniture, equipment, and material remaining in the Hanlon School will be declared as surplus with no usable value.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. And finally, it's around I think there's something for the PBC, right? We're going to transfer control?
Yep.
Okay.
Move that effective March 3rd, 2024, that the care, custody, and control of the Hanlon School be transferred to the Westwood Permanent Building Committee for the purpose of proceeding with demolition.
Second.
Do you have a second?
Oh, I just
Small
closed
comment.
that.
John, so John's got the school now, huh?
John's got, as of March 3rd.
March
As of
3rd.
March 3rd, not
Not
right now.
tomorrow. Yeah.
March 3rd, all right. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous. And anything else, any new business? Anything else further, new business? Okay, great. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.